Greetings and welcome to another lecture in Introductory Psychology. This one involves sleep, or more precisely, it involves why don't we sleep, specifically insomnia. Now, insomnia means pretty much what you think it does. I mean, it means what it says right there. Insomnia is when we do not sleep. We want to, we may be tired, but we don't sleep. Now, there's different types of insomnia depending on exactly where the problem is, exactly when the person is having problems sleeping. And luckily, they're named exactly what they are, pretty much, in terms of when they occur, and so it's fairly easy to tell them apart. So the first type of insomnia is called onset insomnia. Now, this is probably what people think of when they think of insomnia, when they think that they're having a problem. It's onset, because onset insomnia is having problems falling asleep at the beginning of the night, at the onset of sleep. So you want to go to sleep, you lay down, you toss, you turn, you can't get to sleep. You may eventually get to sleep, but there's problems at the beginning of sleep. But there's also other ways that you can have problems getting enough sleep. For instance, there's maintenance insomnia. Now, maintenance insomnia is when you have problems staying asleep. Okay? So for instance, with maintenance insomnia, a person may fall asleep just fine, but they wake up in the middle of the night for an hour or two, and then they get back to bed, but they still have lost that hour or two of sleep. That could be maintenance insomnia. Or the person falls asleep, and they wake up, and they fall 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 asleep. That can also be maintenance insomnia. So the problem here is maintaining sleep. Termination insomnia is when you have basically the person wakes up too early and can't get back to sleep at all. The sleep terminates, it ends too early. So for instance, you don't have to get up till 6, but you wake up at 4 and you can't get back to sleep. That's termination insomnia. So as you can see, we've kind of run the gamut here. We have onset insomnia, beginning of the night, maintenance insomnia, staying asleep, and termination insomnia at the end of the night. Can you have more than one of these? Of course you can. You can have problems falling asleep. You could have all three of them. Wouldn't that be a triple threat? So they're not mutually exclusive. Lastly, I do want to bring up pseudo insomnia. Pseudo, of course, means fake, and pseudo insomnia is not really insomnia, but pseudo insomnia is when a person sleeps, but they think that they're awake. I know this sounds odd, but sometimes a person will lay down and go to sleep, and from the outside, the person is asleep. Their brain waves show they're asleep. They're going through all the proper behaviors of being asleep, but what happens is they don't think that they're asleep. They're sure they're awake. In stages 1 and 2 sleep, very often, people think that they're actually awake when they're not. They're asleep, but they think that they're awake. If you wake them up, they'll say, I've been awake and laying here, even though they haven't been. They've been asleep. They might be snoring or whatever. They still say, I'm awake. And also, people might dream during REM sleep that they are awake, lying in bed, trying to get to sleep. So when you combine the two, plus the fact that during slow wave we generally are not much aware of much of anything, the person can literally wake up after 8 hours of perfectly normal, perfectly good sleep and show all the signs of sleep deprivation. Be tired, be grumpy, be grouchy, not be able to concentrate, which really does make me wonder just how much the symptoms of sleep deprivation are biological and how much they're psychological. But that's a whole nother thing in and of itself. So pseudo-insomnia is not really insomnia, but if you've ever thought that you laid awake all night and tossed and turned when a partner or someone basically said you were snoring, you said, no, I wasn't, I was awake, you might have well been having the pseudo-insomnia. Now that we know what it is, the idea is how to treat it. And what most people tend to jump to in terms of treating insomnia is we're going to take a pill. We're going to take a medication. The problem is, there's a number of problems with sleeping pills. Probably the biggest problem in terms of just the sleep part is, the sleep that people get when they take a sleeping pill is not the same kind of sleep you get from natural sleep. The sleep that you get from a drug, whether it's a natural sleeping pill or whether it's one that you bought over the counter or a prescription, you don't get those same stages of sleep. In fact, they found that people who take sleeping pills to sleep generally spend less time in slow wave and REM sleep than people who fall asleep naturally and normally. And in my Why We Sleep, it appears we sleep for slow wave and REM sleep. And you get less of it with pills. I mean, that's a problem right there. And then you run into things like the pill hangovers. Most of the advertisements for sleeping pills will tell you, for instance, don't take this pill unless you have 8 hours to dedicate to sleep. And that's because if you try to wake up after 4 hours, you're going to be a zombie. Okay, because that medication is still working to keep you asleep. And so people wake up, even after 8 hours or 10 hours, they may wake up and they're groggy and they can't quite concentrate. That's all from the medication. And then, just to really rub salt into the wound, it turns out that people can become dependent on these medications. And if they don't take the medication, they can't fall asleep. There could be physiological dependence in that the body has to have it to allow them to sleep. It could be psychological dependence in which they think if they don't take a pill, then they won't fall asleep, even if that may not be true. Either way, sleeping pills might be useful for 1 or 2 nights, rare, just every now and then. But a person really does not want to be taking sleeping pills on a regular basis. They're too dangerous and they don't really work very well to give you that restful sleep that you want. So some individuals have thought, well, I'll go with a more natural route, although I do want to remind you that herbs and such are indeed drugs. Where do you think we got a lot of the drugs from? We got them from plants. Herbs are plants. But a lot of people think, well, I'm going to try something a little more natural. So melatonin was a really big deal a few years back. Everyone was taking melatonin to try to get to sleep. And it is true that when we are asleep, we generally have more melatonin in our bloodstream than we do when we're awake. But there was no really good evidence that, therefore, taking melatonin will make you sleepy. No one could ever really pinpoint that in a study. And the other problem is melatonin may make you somewhat drowsy, but it also has been known, for instance, to give some people very, very, very vivid dreams, which can be a problem. Okay, if you're scared to death to go to sleep because of your dreams, that might indeed be a problem. Another natural sleep aid is tryptophan. Tryptophan is found in such foods as milk and turkey and such like. And indeed, it does appear that increasing tryptophan may cause drowsiness in some people. Tryptophan, by the way, is an amino acid. An amino acid is a protein building block. And since we do seem to make more proteins when we're asleep, it kind of makes sense that perhaps having more of this raw ingredient around might cause us to want to be sleepy. It is interesting when you think back, because the old wives' tales, if you can't get to sleep, what do? Have a glass of warm milk. Warmth is soothing. Milk has a lot of tryptophan in it. Or it might help explain the post-Thanksgiving Day coma that a lot of Americans find themselves experiencing. I mean, part of that sleepiness is because at Thanksgiving dinner, a lot of people eat enough food. They eat as much food in one meal as they would eat in 4 days otherwise. But a lot of the food that they're eating has tryptophan in it. You eat a lot of turkey, there's a lot of tryptophan there that might cause you to be sleepy. So maybe if you can't sleep, you want a glass of milk and a turkey sandwich. I can think of worse things. But for long-term insomnia, usually, if there isn't any sort of physiological cause, and there usually isn't, behavioral therapies are the best way to go. It is possible to train yourself to fall asleep when you lay down in bed. I know because I've done it. I suffered from insomnia. I used behavioral therapy. It worked quite well. If a person is having problems sleeping, generally what they are told, for instance, is, first of all, if you're having problems sleeping, pick a schedule and stick to it 7 days a week. Do not be yanking yourself all over the place in terms of your sleep schedule. That's going to interfere with your sleep. It's going to interfere with how good the sleep is. So go to sleep at the same time every day. Wake up at the same time every day. Weekday, weekend, it doesn't matter. Also, watch out for the use of stimulants. Caffeine is a stimulant. Nicotine is a stimulant. They usually tell people if you're having problems sleeping to not consume any caffeine after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon if you want to go to bed before midnight. But then what they also tell people is to not spend any time in bed other than when they're sleeping or when they're having sex. And since most people spend a lot more time in bed sleeping than having sex, we're just going to ignore that for the moment. So no more reading in bed, no more watching TV in bed, no more talking on the phone in bed, or texting in bed, or being on the computer in bed, or all the many things that people do in bed that aren't sleep. Because what you're training yourself then to do is you're training yourself to lie in bed and be awake. You don't want to do that. You want to train yourself to lie in bed and go to sleep. So nothing in bed except for sleep and sex. And the last point, and this is important, if you lay down in bed and you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, get up. Don't lay there awake trying desperately to get to sleep, because if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, the odds are you're not going to fall asleep anytime soon, which means you're training yourself to lay awake in bed. So if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, get up and do something boring, not something exciting. Don't play an exciting video game or watch an exciting. Do something boring until you're sleepy, and then another try. And again, if you're not asleep in 15 or 20 minutes, get up. Does this mean you're not going to get a lot of sleep the first couple of nights? Yes, it does. But how much sleep are you getting laying in bed trying desperately to fall asleep? Probably not a whole lot. But what you will probably find is that pretty soon you lie in bed and you'll start to get sleepy. I had myself trained to the point, I'm no longer there, by the way, because I've been lax, but I had myself trained to the point that I could be wide awake and I lay down in bed and I'd be asleep in 2 or 3 minutes. Boom. Because I had trained my body, actually it's through a type of classical conditioning, that when I lay down in bed, it's time to go to sleep. And it works remarkably well. Do not lay in bed and think about your problems. When I get the 3 a.m. brooding attacks that I get on occasion, I don't endure them in bed. I get up and maybe try to distract myself with some weird TV. Trust me, TV at 3 a.m. is weird. Or reading a book or something until I'm tired and then I try again. So you only want to be in bed when you're sleeping, and therefore you could train yourself to go to sleep. Now, like I said, this is for long-term problems. If you've just got a night or two of bad sleep because you're worried about something, then the sleeping pill might work. But be prepared to not only not feel very good in the morning, but a lot of sleeping pills have other fun symptoms I didn't talk about. There's sleepwalking, for instance. There's sleep eating. There are people that have gained 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds because when they take these sleeping pills, they get up in the middle of the night, they eat everything in their refrigerator, and they have no memory of it the next morning. Okay, so if you're going to use sleeping pills, they might be useful for a night here, a night there. For anything long term, as long as it's not a physiological problem, you want to go with the behavioral therapy. They work a whole lot better, they're safer, and it's free.